A Quiet Place Day One is the newest film in the Quiet Place franchise, this time directed by Michael Soronsky. As the title suggests, this is a prequel set during the first day of the invasion and follows Lupita Nyong'o and Joseph Quinn as they try to escape New York in silence. Now, before I talk about Day One, I should probably give my thoughts on the previous two films. The first Quiet Place came out in 2018 and was a breath of fresh air for the horror genre. While I'm sure there have been sensory-focused horror movies in the past, none to my knowledge have taken the approach that this did. Centering a movie around absolute silence made for not only a tense movie, but a tense movie watching experience. Seeing this in the theater was a haunting, stressful experience to say the least. With a lot of movies, you're used to it being loud and bombastic. Even most horror movies typically build up to a jump scare with intrusive, cresting music. Here, with the movie being so silent and ambient, it almost makes you, the viewer, hesitant to move or breathe or make a sound. And anything that encourages people to shut the fuck up in a movie theater is absolutely welcome. Watching it all these years later, it still holds up. It's a very simple story, as we're just following this family trying to live out their lives in a world where you can't make noise, but the world itself is very well realized. They do a great job showing through visuals what has happened and how this world is currently functioning. And the attention to detail between them using leaves as plates, playing Monopoly with cloth pieces, covering the roads with trails of sand, and several other methods to not make noise is really impressive. The movie is also tense as all hell. Because of how ambient everything else is, even the smallest sound is startling. John Krasinski proves himself to be a true talent, because the movie is not only creepy, but also really good looking. The acting from the entire family is spot on, and the fact that they can elicit so much emotion without saying anything is amazing. Not everything about the movie works. It is still a horror movie at the end of the day, so you're gonna have some stupid things happen that probably didn't need to. And the effects on the monster aren't great, but beyond that, this movie has only gotten better with age. My initial rating was a 4, but I'd be okay giving it the 4.5. It is really good. Next up is A Quiet Place Part 2, released in 2021 after several delays, and takes place mere minutes after the first one. After the family's home gets demolished, they must venture through the outside, evading the aliens and other threats to find safety. I remember being pretty lukewarm towards this movie when I first saw it. I didn't think it was bad, it just wasn't great and not as good as the first one. Rewatching it, I still think the first is better, but I will say there are a lot of aspects to this movie that have held up better than I thought. The cold open showing the family on day one was really effective in conveying a sense of panic. There are still a lot of tense and in some cases even brutal scenes, and all the actors do great. Millicent Simmonds continues to be the standout as far as performances go, and the arc she has with Cillian Murphy was probably the most interesting part of the movie. John Krasinski returns as director, and the movie looks absolutely gorgeous. And the music does well, balancing the emotions of slow-moving dread and anxiety-filled panic. So with all that said, what didn't work in the movie? Well, for one, giving the characters a safe area where they're free to talk more, even if it is at a low volume, kinda kills a lot of the tension. Even when they were in the house in the first one, they still had to be careful and not talk. The fact that they talk more in general kind of bugged me because it leaves less room for visual storytelling like the first. The movie is roughly the same length as the first movie, but where the first movie flew by, this one doesn't feel nearly as quick. Also, there are a lot of really stupid things in this movie. The mom leaving her injured son to look after the baby, the son attracting the monster into the hideout, locking himself in the vault, and then using up most of the oxygen. That whole sequence on the dock with the evil tribe of survivors. The fact that one of the monsters who can't swim made their way to the safe haven because A, they held on to the bottom of Cillian Murphy's boat and weren't detected, or B, they learned to drive. Either way you look at it, it is really stupid. Whereas some of the dumb stuff in the first movie added to the tension, here it just seems like an excuse to put the characters in peril. Like I said, the movie isn't as good as the first, but a lot of the good aspects of it keep it above water for me. Initially I rated it a 3, but I'd bump it up to a 3.5 out of 5. And now, finally, we can get into day one. I'm gonna issue a full spoiler warning, so if you want to go in blind, skip to the end to see my rating. I was really worried that this movie wasn't gonna be good based on the trailers, but wanted to remain optimistic. And while the movie isn't bad, it is still the weakest of the films thus far. Firstly, like I said at the start, Michael Soronsky is in the directing chair this time, whose only other movie has been Pig with Nicolas Cage. And I don't want to claim that this material isn't suited for him, because there are sections of this movie that are great, but a lot of the scenes involving the aliens attacking look really bad. They're shot and edited so poorly, and it's impossible to tell what's going on, not helped by the fact that everything looks super gray and murky. The movie also fails to recognize what made A Quiet Place so intense, and that's the quiet parts. The music and the sound design in this movie are so intrusive and just kill any kind of tension that could be built. The movie also tries to go a bit bigger and more epic with its plot and the stakes, and it's just kind of meh. The thing that makes the first two movies and the second act of this movie so interesting is that it is a much more personal story, and it's on a much smaller scale. Also, there is a very random out of place scene in the middle of this movie that just screams sequel bait. With all that being said, there is still a lot I liked about the movie. I do like the concept of showing this world from different points of view in different time frames, and setting it in New York, one of the loudest cities in the country, and seeing what it turns into is pretty cool. The acting across the board is also great. Lupita Nyong'o and Joseph Quinn do really well, but the standout is easily that fucking cat. I also really like the arc that Sam goes through in this movie. She spent so much time trapped in hospice care, she's fed up, she's in pain, and then this invasion happens and it kind of gives her a new lease on life. Like I said, the movie really picks up in the second act, and one scene in particular is really emotionally effective. All in all, the movie is kind of a mixed bag. There are some really strong elements mixed with a lot of really lackluster elements. I would like to see more in-between films set in this universe, maybe just on a smaller scale and with better direction. And after revisiting the first two, I am very excited to see Krasinski return to the franchise with part 3. Anyway, going to my ranking, I'd give A Quiet Place Day 1 a 3 out of 5.